What's going on, everybody? I want to show you a couple things. We're going to talk about what Bitcoin does post-election, what it has always done. We're also going to talk about the upcoming Fed meeting today, what the probabilities are. Keeping rates current, at least as of me checking, is off the board now, and there's actually a small possibility of a 50 basis point cut. But anyways, we'll get into that in a second. I also want to show you Bitcoin on the chart, what I'm watching, and we'll look over a Bitcoin miner as well. And we'll also check out the spot Bitcoin ETFs and what's been going on there lately. But first off, I'll try to zoom this in for you guys. You can see after the election, the uncertainty of the election, we always get a spike, and so far we are getting that. It's just not here on this chart, but we are getting a nice little spike, break of all-time high. The funny thing is, this cycle, we saw a break of all-time high already, if you guys remember. This was likely due to the added hype from the spot Bitcoin ETFs. But regardless, we are breaking that all-time high. We broke out of that all-time high. And this basically happens after every election in the Q4. The Q4 is where you want to really be in Bitcoin. Q4 every time has seen a nice rally, and so far this is shaping out to be no different. And considering what we just got through, we got through a multi-month correction. I think that also gives us the green light for a Q4 run. If we were rallying up to Q4, I might think otherwise. But to me, everything is playing out exactly as planned. Now, I do want to show you guys what's been going on with the spot Bitcoin ETFs. So yesterday, we did see some massive inflows, not from IBIT though. IBIT saw an outflow. We saw $621 million worth of inflows, with Fidelity's fund leading the way with $308 million in inflows. But yeah, IBIT, or BlackRock's fund, did see an outflow. They saw an outflow the day before. And on November 5, we did see some outflows. The day before that, we saw some outflows. This is the first day this week that we saw actual inflows. I have a feeling today might be a small inflow as well, but we'll have to wait till the day ends. But when you look at the total, we have $24 billion in these spot Bitcoin ETFs. Now, I did want to show you guys Bitcoin, and I think it's going to keep following this pattern. We may be due for a little cool down. We may be due for a little correction, or Bitcoin's just going to break out of this pattern and go parabolic. One thing to realize is we are getting some divergences. If you look at the RSI, you'll see that the RSI is basically trying to top out. We're kind of topping out. Depends on where we end up here. If we start pulling back here, that would make sense. If we break out, if we do break this higher, this would invalidate this bearish divergence. But it does look like we are, starting to level out on the RSI. We might be due to cool down. The price is continuing to spike while the RSI is cooling down. And also, it supports being on the top of this channel if we cool down and, test our ascending support, get a little closer to these moving averages before we continue onward and upward. But we are now above the all-time high. We are now above the last cycle top. Bitcoin is playing out its Q4 just like past cycles. One thing to be aware of is on the 4-hour, we are also getting a bit of a divergence. We're seeing the RSI start cooling down while the price has been rising still. So we may be due for a few day pullback. We may just ignore it and keep rallying. In the end, the charts aren't 100%, but it does give us a good indication that we may be due for a little retrace, at least a little cool down, maybe a test of 74K as support, that previous all-time high as support. Remember, we don't just go up and up and up and to the right in perpetuity. There are going to be red days. There are going to be pullbacks. But keep in mind, we just got out of this multi-month pullback. And over the rest of this year, I do expect Bitcoin to go much higher. But there are going to be red days along the way. One thing that I thought was going to bring a red day today potentially was the FOMC. There is a bit of uncertainty there, obviously, but when you think about it, we're basically collectively at this point agreeing that we're going to get a 25 basis point cut. So is there really any uncertainty here? Besides what wording Fed Powell is going to use, besides the actual meeting itself and the wording used, we know what to expect rate cut wise. And there's even a very, very, very small chance, not going to happen probably, but the probabilities are almost 1% chance of a 50 basis point cut. This just got on the board here only a few days ago. The market was expecting either no cut or 25 basis point cut, but because of that jobs data, in my opinion, that was really lower than estimates, I think that's why we are now looking at just this small sliver of a chance of a 50 basis point cut. But let's face the facts. The reality is we're going to likely get a 25 basis point cut, at least according to this. Very, very high likelihood. And that should help risk on assets. As we see rates continue to come down, that should also help small caps. Because Wall Street knows that, especially with unprofitable companies, you're either going to dilute shares, which shareholders don't want, obviously, or you're going to take out high interest rate debt. As the rates come down, that high interest rate debt becomes not high interest rate debt. And the market is perceiving that as a good thing for the Bitcoin miners, for the small caps, for risk on assets. And, it's inflation cycle. You get cycles of high inflation, and then you get cycles of high rates bringing down inflation, and then the rates come down and the cycle repeats. The money printer turns back on, and then they have to go in and raise rates again. and the cycle continues. Now, I did want to bring up Riot. Riot is also looking at some bearish divergences on the daily, but you'll see that the RSI is cooling down pretty heavily while the price is, spiking still. Keep an eye on this megaphone pattern, this broadening pattern. I think we might pull back. There's potential we fill the gap. Maybe if Bitcoin keeps rallying, Riot can just keep going a little more overextended. But in my opinion, it's due to cool down a little bit. Retrace, test some previous levels as support before it goes on its next leg up, before it breaks this descending resistance that I've been watching. Things are beginning to look better, but keep in mind Riot has not yet flipped its moving averages. We are still looking at that death cross, and they are working on it though. We are seeing the 50 get closer to the 200 MA. I do think we are going to see that golden cross from Riot, and it is coming very soon. Maybe a pullback first, especially if Bitcoin pulls back a bit. We should see a nice retracement from the Bitcoin miners, a good chance to buy in. It is getting later and later in the cycle though, remember that. But I still see the Bitcoin miners, Bitcoin as a buy. Just, take advantage of the red days. You don't want to buy on huge spike days. And you want to remember where we came from. Bitcoin was 15,000 at the bottom of this bear cycle. In my opinion, Bitcoin might do somewhere around a 10x possibly, so $150,000. Just keep in mind, at Bitcoin's current price, you're hoping for a 2x if it gets there. So as Bitcoin goes up, those gains are going to be diminished. As Bitcoin rallies, as we get later into the cycle, you got to realize you can't necessarily expect a 2x, 3x, 4x anymore. That's still a possibility from the miners in my opinion, but as we get later and later into the cycle, the risk for the downside becomes higher and higher. That's when we want to be out. But in my opinion, it is still the time to be in. It is still the time to be a buyer. It is still the time to be bullish. And I do think there are still multiples from here, even for Bitcoin, even if it's just a 2x potentially. If Bitcoin goes to 150K, what do I see Riot doing? Well, Riot will likely do a more than 2x. Riot could do a 3 or 4x to Bitcoin's 2x. If Bitcoin goes to 150K, I don't see why Riot can't go to something like 50, to something like 40. Will Riot break its last cycle high at nearly $80? I'm not betting on it. I'm not sitting here just waiting to sell at that point. I will sell on the way up. I will sell following the cycle, regardless of if Riot at the end of the cycle, in late 2025, mid 2025, if Riot's $30, $40, $50, $70, it doesn't matter. I'm following the cycle. That is what you guys need to pay attention to, in my opinion. Price targets are a losing battle, in my opinion, and things change constantly. I'd rather follow the cycle, sell Riot, in $30, $40, $50 and on the way up, than to just hold out and say, I'm not selling a single thing until it gets to $70. I'm not selling anything until it gets to $50. Because what if it doesn't? What if you're stuck holding the bag, waiting until next cycle? You don't want to wait another 3 years, however long it takes to get into the next bull run. You want to take advantage of this one. You want to trim towards the top. You want to reestablish that cash balance. As these Bitcoin miners go up in percentage to your overall portfolio, your cash balance in percentage is going to go smaller because these stocks are going up. So keep in mind that you want to keep that cash at a certain percentage to your overall stock portfolio, whether it's 10% cash you like, 20% cash you like. Try to keep it like that as these Bitcoin miners rally. As certain things in your portfolio rally, you want to build up your cash to keep your cash percentage at that number you like, at that percentage you like. When everything's going 2x, 3x, 4x, your cash percentage is going to be smaller by comparison because of how much those stock positions have grown. So that is one way to, remind yourself to trim, is once you see your cash balance getting smaller in comparison to your portfolio, might be time to take some profits, trim 10%, something like that, and build up your cash balance. And just make sure you're building up your cash balance as we get later and later into the cycle in preparation of the accumulation phase. Remember, you want to be steps ahead of the market. While we still have a lot of a bull run ahead of us, we also want to think a little bit about the next cycle. We want to think a little bit about the upcoming crypto winter. We don't want to catch FOMO at the end. We don't want to get, that FOMO bug where you see things going up and you just want more of that, so you want to buy towards the top when things are rallying because you think everything just keeps going up and you're missing out. You could be making more if you have a little more in there. That is when you exercise caution. When everyone else is piling in, you want to start planning your exit. I know a lot of people keep saying it's so early, but this time comes before you know it. People get the FOMO and start ignoring, the time to take profits. People catch FOMO seeing CleanSpark potentially get, back to the 20s to the 30s going crazy, and you start just getting blinded thinking it's going to go to 100, it's going to 200. Why should I sell now at 50? Why should I trim at all? It's going to go much higher. And in my opinion, that is not the thought process to have. In my opinion, you just want to follow the cycle and everything else will fall in place. But let me know how you guys are feeling about this week. How are you feeling about the FOMC? How are you feeling about Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners? It has definitely been a fun time lately. And think about this, we're still in early Q4. We still have the rest of this quarter to go and 2025. And we have now broke all-time high. The sky's the limit. Thanks as always for watching, guys. I appreciate you, and I'll see you next time.